Good afternoon, and welcome to the next Ombudsman Reports. Today, I'd like to introduce our guests, Jim Lynch, Robin Baker, and Mike Milliken. And Jim, give us a little bit about yourself, please.
I'm a certified ombudsman here in the Manatee County and Hillsborough County for our District 8, and I'm also the representative for our state council representing District 8 as an ombudsman.
Okay. Robin?
I'm the West Regional Manager, and I've been with the program for 11 years as of February.
What does that mean, Regional Manager?
I oversee 4 districts, and I cover from Polk Highlands and Hardy over to Pasco and Pinellas, and then down to Collier County.
Mike, a little bit about what you do for us?
Well, good morning. I'm the state ombudsman. I cover the entire state of Florida. All the ombudsmen in the program work for the state office. So I run the program for the state.
Department comes under the Department of Elder Affairs?
Comes under the Department of Elder Affairs. I have a direct line to the Secretary of the department.
Great, good. Let me ask you then, when did the program start in Florida?
Well, the program actually started in Florida. In about 1975, Florida was given a grant to run a pilot. And then in 1978, the Older Americans Act authorized all states to actually have a program and also required it.
So all states have the program now?
All 50 states, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Washington, D.C.
Oh, really? I didn't know about Guam and Puerto Rico. Very good, very good. Robin, maybe you can tell her why it was needed, and what did the governor, how did he get it started?
It was actually the federal government that started it, and it was because of the conditions in facilities becoming more and more evident that it was substandard care and there was abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So they decided that there was agencies that needed to oversee and help regulate the facilities.
Was there any problem with the legislator getting on board with it?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, okay. Mike, are there similar programs in other states? You said there's all 50 states, but is it the same as ours, or?
There are similar programs in some states. Some states run it differently. It's really up to the state of how they're going to operate their program. Some states are all volunteers. Some states are volunteers and paid employees. In some states, the ombudsmen work out of the AAA offices or the Area Agency for Aging.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a better deal if they're volunteers or if they're paid?
Well, actually, the legislature said that in order to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of the residents, it's better to have citizen volunteers than actual employees doing the work.
Mm-hmm. But also, I think we'd probably have more in the state if they're volunteers, and because otherwise you'd have to have X number of dollars to be able to pay them.
Right. We have a number of volunteers, and if we had to actually pay those folks a state wage, it would be very expensive.
Yeah, okay. Jim, what are some of the qualifications to be an ombudsman?
Well,
because you went through the training and everything, I assume.
Yes. Mostly just a desire to help people. And I think if you have that desire, you'll get rewarded from this job. There's no particular background requirement. It does help if you know a little bit about maybe medicine or long-term care facilities, but everything that you need will be taught to you. And I found that the staff is so helpful that anybody can volunteer and be successful at it. The program is also, I found, very flexible to accept volunteers and help them to be useful to help citizens and residents of long-term care facilities.
Robin, can you tell us some of the training? Because I know you trained a lot of people. I helped mentor a couple of them, but and also, is there a background check required?
Yes. In order to become a volunteer ombudsman, you actually have to go through an interview process. Once you complete that process, you have to do paperwork, including a background check, a level 2 background screening. Once that comes back clear, then you go ahead and you start your online training modules. There's 7 online training modules. And then you go to 2 classroom trainings, which complete modules 8 and 9, and they teach you about assessments, complaints, and visits. And then the ombudsman will go out with another certified individual for 3 assessments and 3 complaints. And as long as they're comfortable at that point, then they can become certified.
Okay. And how many do we need in District 8, do you think?
Oh,
I know we have almost 400 facilities.
yeah, we have 396 facilities in Hillsborough, Manatee County, which is West Central.
Right.
I think it would be great to probably get up to 40. We've probably never been above 25, I think, in our district. So 40 would be great.
Mike, what's the goal for the state?
We have about 4,140 long-term care facilities in the state. Based on those numbers, we feel comfortable that if we could get up to 410 ombudsmen, which would be roughly 10 facilities per ombudsman, that we could cover the area sufficiently.
Yeah. What are some of the services that the program offers when they're going into the facilities?
Well, the Ombudsman program in itself is an advocacy agency. So our job is to advocate for the desires of the residents in the facility. So it could be anything from helping them get the appropriate shower time, that if they're used to showering at 9 o'clock at night at home and they go into a facility and they want to shower at 9, but the facility says, no, you can only shower at 2, then we will work with the resident in the facility to resolve that issue, to get it to where there's a time that the resident wants and the facility can accommodate.
Work a compromise?
A compromise to the advantage of the resident.
Yeah.
We will get it as close to what the resident would desire as possible. And it also ranges all the way up to allegations of abuse.
Yeah, okay. Jim, you're our state council representative. What does that entail?
Well, I was asked to represent our district before the state council. There are 13 districts and 18 local councils throughout the state. We meet twice a year in person and discuss issues that affect the program on a statewide basis. And it's really been helpful for me to see the larger picture, as I've been an ombudsman now a little over 3 years, and discussing these issues has been great. Also, as part of the state council, I've been given the opportunity to work on one of the 4 work groups, which include advocacy, education, data, and my work group that I selected was retention, recruitment, and recognition. So we're always looking, in our work group, we're always looking for how we can help volunteers, gain more volunteers, and retain the ones we have. And it's been a real challenge. And now, so when I attend these state council meetings, I bring back information and to that my local council, and I also obtain information from my local council and share it at the state level, so that there's input from all ombudsmen throughout the state at the state council level.
Okay, great. Robin, we talk about going and helping everybody. What type of facilities do we actually go into?
We go into any facility that's licensed as an adult family care home, assisted living facility, or nursing home.
Yeah, can you explain an adult family care home?
Adult family care homes are really a residential style setting where the person that runs the facility lives in the facility with the residents, and they can have no more than 5 residents in the facility, and they need minimal care, minimal assistance really.
How about if you have a memory care unit, do we get involved with that also?
Absolutely. Usually they are located within the assisted living facilities, or they're a standalone memory care. But as long as they are licensed as an assisted living facility, nursing home, or adult family care home, we can assist.
Okay. Mike, what is the program? Do we assist all residents in long-term care, or is there some we wouldn't help?
We assist all residents.
Okay,
As
good.
long as they're in the facility, they can request our assistance.
How about some of these facilities where they have like independent living and they have memory care and they have assisted living? Do we help somebody that's in a independent living area?
If a facility contains independent living and it's associated together with an assisted living, as long as the issue can possibly affect the assisted living side, then we'll take on that issue.
But otherwise, they have to work out the disagreements on their own?
Generally, independent living, they have another mechanism. They can call the Consumer Protection Agency for the state.
APS
and they can,
or something like that?
Office of Insurance
Yeah.
Regulation.
Oh, okay.
So they can call there and lodge a complaint against the facility that way for independent living. But like I said, if the issue actually affects either the assisted living or the nursing home side, then we can take on that complaint.
Okay. What criteria does a client need to obtain services, and what factors would prevent the client or be barriers for the client from getting services?
There are none.
No, except, let's say, if they're
They
in an
have-
independent living situation.
Right, as long as they're a resident of assisted living, a nursing home, or adult family care home, we will serve them.
All right. In responding to complaints, how does an ombudsman evaluate, and how does it move up the chain of command, and what's the decision-making process? Maybe you can address this, Jim.
Sure. The first step would be to get the consent of the resident and make sure that the resident understands the process and that we work for the resident. And then it's a question of trying to understand the nature of the complaint. Sometimes the resident is the complainant, and sometimes it's a third party. It could be a family member. It could be just about anybody, and it also can be anonymous. And that helps us to find out where residents actually need the help, and so we can get to them. But regardless of who files the complaint, we're going to make sure that it's the resident who wants our help, and we'll fashion our assistance to make sure that their desires are met.
Yeah. You get an example without mentioning any names or facility names?
About
Some of the issues that you've
sure.
come up with?
Well, and they may be being discharged from the facility for a reason that the resident feels is unjust or unfair. They may be treated disrespectfully or not being properly cared for. There may be problems with the building, the facility itself. It's almost unlimited, the issues that we face every day, but it's also very enjoyable and helpful to help the residents, who are just amazing people. They're a vulnerable group because they're in these facilities, and sometimes they're subject to the requirements of the facility, but we try to make sure that they realize this is their home and that they have certain rights that we can help protect and advocate on their behalf.
Yeah. Okay. Robin, I know one of the requirements is we have to do annual assessments of the facilities, and we try to do quarterly visits, but we're a little low on manpower for the quarterly visits. But what's the difference between the two?
An assessment is really resident interviewing on different sets of conditions in the facility. It could go over their residents' rights and how they're being honored. It could go over medication. So it's a snapshot of their visit in the facility and what residents perceive the care and the quality of life and the standards of the facility to be. A visit is more or less exactly as it's stated, a visit. It would be like me coming to your house, just stopping by, coming to see you, maybe providing you information about who I am and what I do, and then leaving. Unless you do present a problem, of course, we would assist with that at that time.
Mike, what's the, I don't want to say criteria, but what tools do we need if we find we need to close a facility? What is the requirements to be able to actually close a facility?
Well, the Ombudsman program in itself doesn't close the facility. That's done by whichever agency has found the violations that would cause the closure.
Yeah.
Once we're notified of that, we will work with our partner agencies, Adult Protective Services, Agency for Healthcare Administration, Agency for Persons with Disabilities, or whoever's involved in it. We'll get together with them. We'll find out what the needs of the residents are. We'll make sure all the residents are notified. We'll provide them with options of different facilities in the areas. Once they make their choice and the facility they want to go to has accepted them, we will visit them again once they have moved into that new facility to make sure all their belongings have come with them, all their medications have come with them, they're satisfied with their placement. So we'll follow them from the facility that's closing to the new facility.
Great, great. Jim, I know you and I have done quite a few of these, but what are you looking for when you do an annual assessment on a facility?
Well, I'd like to find out, and I do ask up front, for a record of the complaints that they have on file, if they have a complaint or grievance process. And I also check the minutes of the Residence Council and the Family Council if they have one. And then I go through those to see if there are any reoccurring complaints that haven't been resolved. That's the big red flag that I'm looking for. I'll also interview at least 10%, it's usually closer to 40 or 50% of the residents, to see if I can detect any reoccurring problems. And then I'll sit down with the administrator and find out if they're soliciting information and input from the residents, and I'll encourage that. So it's an overall look at the facility to make sure that there's a flow of communication between the residents and the administration for the benefit of the residents.
Okay. And if you have a problem that's not being taken care of, how do you handle that?
Well, if the problem originates with a resident, it can become a complaint. And I would go in to discuss it with the resident. Sometimes the resident would rather have me try to resolve it on a more informal basis, and I'll just try to do it personally between myself and the administrator, pointing out certain areas that need to be addressed. Now, I can go back as a follow-up to the assessment to make sure certain things are done that I feel or that we feel need to be addressed so that residents feel at home, protected, and safe inside the facility.
And if you have no luck there?
Well, then I'll raise it up to the district ombudsman and the regional ombudsman, and we'll get support. You know, we can refer cases to other agencies and get the assistance of other state and local agencies to get the cooperation of the facilities. I'm glad to report that the overwhelming majority of facilities that I deal with understand the benefit of accepting our recommendations and following through, because it makes the residents happy, safe, and it's for their welfare. And so when they're happy, the facility works so much better, and everybody's happy then. And most administrators understand this process and work hand in glove with us to make sure that the residents are satisfied.
Okay, Robin, what happens if it gets up to your office level?
It depends on what the issue is. If it's an issue that's a regulatory issue and they are violating a regulation, we will send a referral to the appropriate partner agency to make sure that they look into that as well. Mm-hmm. If it's not a regulatory violation, then it may be that it's just noted in the assessment to show that there are poor conditions or not the best quality of life as perceived by the residents that we interviewed. And families and friends and anybody looking for a facility can actually call us and request a copy of the last assessment to help find placement and pick a facility for their loved one.
Jim mentioned getting consent from the resident. Now, what happens if the individual's like in a memory care unit and there is an issue, but they can't give you, because of their incapacity, they can't give you permission? What do you do then?
Well, we would look to make sure and find out if they have a power of attorney or a guardian, and then go to that person to get the consent. If for some reason we cannot get the consent from the resident and the guardian, we always can go to our state ombudsman, who has statutory authority to give consent on behalf of a resident. So overall, we take precautions to make sure that it's really what the resident or those who have authority over him want to do. And if there is no one around who can make that decision, then the program itself has the ability to.
Mike, what is your requirement at your end before you would give this permission to make sure that all bases are covered, so to speak?
What I'll do is they actually submit a request into me, and I'll look over the request and see,
Ours would go through Robin?
Well, it would go from the ombudsman to the district manager, from the district manager to the regional manager, and from the regional manager to me.
Okay.
I would have it reviewed by our program lawyer to make sure that all the proper steps have been taken. Did we make contact with the resident? Was the resident able to give consent? Yes or no? Did we try to find out if there was a legal representative for that resident, be it a power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, or guardian? Yes or no? What other obstacles are there that prevent us from getting consent any other way? If all those bases have been covered, and I feel that we really need to investigate this complaint, then I will go ahead and issue the consent to do so.
Okay. So basically, we're erring on the side of the resident that we take every precaution for their safety and their care.
Absolutely. Our program is resident driven. If someone files a complaint on behalf of a resident, and we go and we visit the resident, and the resident decides that they do not want our services, then it stops right there, regardless of who the complainant is, because it is resident driven. Our work is for the residents. Sometimes it's hard for other people to accept that we're not going to investigate a complaint that they filed.
Yeah.
But they also have to understand that we work for the resident.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I had one just like that yesterday. A lady I went to visit, and she was happy, she was content, and she told me to go. It wasn't the exact
words.
Yeah. So, like I say, we do it for the resident. So I left the lady alone and told her to go back to her bridge game.
Absolutely.
And, Jim, what are some of the issues that we run into in general?
Well, any issue that a resident complains about, we would look into. It might be the food. It may be the way that certain employees of the facility are treating the resident. It may be problems with other residents. Sometimes they're conflicting problems. If you can think of a long-term care resident in a facility, there's so many numerous different problems that can arise with them living there full-time as their home. And the competing interests of other residents as well as the facility. We try to resolve those for the benefit of the residents. So there's so many different perspectives that a resident can raise. Sometimes it's a communication problem where the resident has never received adequate information to understand what's happening to them. And so the ombudsman job there would be to get the correct information and to communicate it in a manner that the resident understands. Sometimes it's something that's violative of a regulation or a procedure. Sometimes it's something that just doesn't make sense. So we look for a win-win solution between the administration of the facility and the resident or residents to try to resolve it. You know, sometimes we have all resident complaints in which no one resident is identified, but we're looking at a problem that will affect potentially all the residents. So we will address a systemic issue throughout the whole facility.
Yeah. You have to talk to several of the residents to find out if there is a problem or not?
Yes, for sure. And there may be some that aren't affected by the problem, and there may be only one or two that are. We also like to talk to the residents whenever we go into a facility. That's one of the great things about this job, just getting to know people. You know, World War II vets and women who have just amazing careers, and now they're in the golden years of their life, and they're in this facility, and many of them don't have relatives or friends to go visit them. And we serve the function of being able to communicate and help that individual.
Yeah. How does the family meetings work?
Well, once we get the consent of the resident and the resident authorizes us to talk to their family members, we communicate, and I've communicated with many family members who are out of state, who are concerned about their family member. In fact, I have a mother who's up in New Jersey, in and out of a facility, and I communicate with my siblings. So I know exactly what it's like to be a family member of a resident of a long-term care facility in Florida. So I try to help them, communicate with them. In some cases where there are a lot of family members, we actually have a point of contact created so that there's not so much communication that it creates problems itself. We try to uniform the communication so that the facility has a point of contact and the family has a point of contact, so the information can be accurate and properly disseminated.
Yeah, Robin, you said you had a large district. What all counties do you cover?
My region, it covers Polk, Highlands, and Hardy, Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota, Lee, Glades, Collier, DeSoto, Hendry. I think that's it.
That's it? Yeah.
Yes.
What's a ballpark figure, how many complaints a year your organization, your office would handle? Because I know they float up to you after they've been
and I don't
turned
know
in.
overall the whole state. I think Mike may know that
No, but I'm talking
more.
about your
But
region.
within my region, I cover 4 districts. So we have 2 districts that probably average anywhere between 50 to 80 complaints a month, and then I have 2 other districts that are a little bit more slow paced that may have between 10 and 15 a month.
Yeah. Mike, any idea on the state level? Or as a whole, how many come into your office
It's over 7,000 a year.
a year? Yeah. Miami probably leads the way, one of the biggest areas.
No.
Miami does have its issues, but there are other areas that generate far more complaints.
Really?
West Central
Yes.
and
excuse me.
West Coast
Yes.
do get the highest number of complaints.
We do?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know whether it be good or bad.
Well, it's not whether it's good or bad. It's a lot of it's based on the ombudsman actually having a presence in the facility and the residents being aware, of who they can file a complaint with, how good of a job the facility does, and making the residents aware of, if you have an issue and we can't resolve it, these are the other state agencies that you can call. So it's not whether or not so much the facility is good or bad, it's whether the residents understand that they can file these
Yeah,
complaints.
I know when I go in to make an assessment, one of the things I look for, and I'm sure Jim does too, is make sure they have our posters. And if it's a two-story building, and we want to make sure the posters are on both floors, and in Spanish and in English, so the residents do know who to call if they do have a problem. And Jim, what got you interested into the program?
Well, Don, I retired a couple of years ago. I took about a year off to decompress. But you know, all my professional career, I always try to work in a job that allowed me to help others. And so I was looking for a volunteer job that would allow me to help others. And boy, this is really the job. As I said, I have a mother who's going to be 92 next month, and I couldn't be up there to help her every day, so I decided to try to do something that could help people like her. And it's amazing that I meet residents every day that sound like her, look like her, have the same types of problems as her. So I may not be helping my mom directly, but I'm helping people like her. Also, it's allowed me to understand the problems that long-term care residents face. And so I've been better capable now, having been an ombudsman for 3 years, to assist my brothers and sisters in taking care of my mom. And that's a benefit that you can never, you know, I never even thought about before I started. But the real benefit was just getting to meet the residents, the amazing people that are in our long-term care facilities here in Florida, who just are so great, and it's a privilege for me to be able to help them every day and get to know them.
Great. Okay, we're getting, unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here, so I'd like to ask Robin to say any last words that you'd like to encourage people to call us and be a volunteer.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a wonderful program. Like I said, I've been here for 11 years, and you meet some of the most amazing individuals, both in the facilities, as Jim said, as well as the other volunteers that are working with the program and the staff. So anybody that has any questions can always give us a call and get any kind of consultation needed. And we are always in need of volunteers. So if anybody has free time and they want to learn about long-term care, they want to meet great people, and they want to help others, this is a great place to be.
Great. Mike, any last words?
A lot of times when people look for volunteer opportunities, they always look at what the end result of being the volunteer for that organization is. I can tell you that personally that when you go into a facility and you walk down a hallway and you stop and you spend 5 minutes with an elderly resident in a wheelchair who hasn't had a visitor in a couple of years, when you're done with that 5 minutes and that resident looks up and smiles at you and says, "Thank you so much,"
Yeah.
that's a reward that you just can't put any value on.
Great, yeah. And one thing I would like to say about the program is you don't have to worry about spending 8 hours a day on it. It's, as you know, we call, say we have a complaint in your area, do you have the time to handle it? And if you say no, then we get one of the other ombudsmen to do it. So don't feel that it has to be an 9 to 10 job. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.